Happy Presentation Week! I'm Brittney Guiddy, and I'm going to be discussing issues of tourism and how it reacts to disasters. First things first, we should define both of these terms. In 1990, FEMA defined disaster as an occurrence that has resulted in property damages, deaths, and/or injuries to a community. Some examples can be hurricanes, floods, or earthquakes, to name a few. Tourism can be defined as a temporary visit to another region or country for a period exceeding that of a 24-hour span. Tourism and disaster share a pretty close relationship, and the impacts of a disaster can either ruin, or as bad as this sounds, help rebuild economies of countries that are not as economically developed as larger ones. Initially, there is a large, dramatic disruption of tourism when disaster strikes, as tourism is one of the key income-generating tools that a country possesses. A disaster-stricken country must take all necessary precautions in order to adjust and rebuild their empire. Let's begin by discussing how tourism and a disaster relate following an occurrence. At first, tourism will drop significantly out of fear, which also means that the cost curve of the economy is being bent in the wrong direction. With money being spent, businesses will begin to suffer in such a weak economic state, no matter how large or small they are, leading to unemployment. Disposable income of citizens will begin insufficient, causing more and more businesses to go bankrupt. Although one would expect a country's tourism to decline, in some cases there has been an increase as they are now advertised as prominent historical marks. One remarkable example of this would be the volcanic eruption that occurred on Mount Vesuvius, located in Italy. 3 meters of rock fell directly onto the city of Pompeii, leaving at least 1,150 people dead and many, many more deaths that were not able to be accounted for. As horrid as this sounds, on June 5, 1995, this area was declared a national park, which skyrocketed tourism and all educational endeavors. But not all disaster-stricken regions are able to bounce back as easily. The tsunami that struck Thailand in 2004 around Southeastern Asia remains one of the most devastating disasters the world would come to know, as the initial quake reached an alarming 9.0 on the Richter scale. The tsunami's direct effect on tourism created the obvious indication that Thailand was unsafe and clearly demolished. Physical damage included all water, food, shelter, transportation, and electricity to be immediately cut off, which essentially eliminated all means of tourism. This caused a great deal of economic pain, as 6% of GDP in Thailand was reliant on tourism. Another 3.8% worth of hospitality sectors were just a mere number compared to the near 50% of gross income being a direct factor of tourism. About 120,000 people became unemployed, which we've previously discussed the domino effect that job loss can lead to. Unfortunately for Thailand, despite tourism rising at a snail's pace, those who dare to approach are refusing to spend money or share an interest in exploring what once was. Thailand was by no means a well-developed country to begin with, so one can imagine that the effects of a disaster would be harder to bounce back from than the volcanic eruption in Italy that we previously talked about. It's important to mention how the media has affected tourism in Thailand, because due to the large amount of attention garnered for this catastrophic event, tourism has been rising. Curiosity has been increased by the news. Unfortunately for Thailand, though, if the economic state doesn't rebuild itself sooner than later, the financial burden will hurt just as badly as the environmental disasters. In conclusion, many countries and regions are susceptible to a disaster, but the rate of recovery depends on tourism. Countries that are reliant on tourism must generate a sense of historical and educational allure in order to ensue a proper destination site capable of attracting people and their wallets. Trade and industrial ability must be reestablished, or all means of living will succumb to the unfortunate environmental burden.